Hi, I'm Stacy with Easy Design Resources, and today we're going to use brushes to get a variety of options for a logo design. Adobe Illustrator gives you a pretty large collection of free brushes, which include round and elliptical options, as well as a ton of organic styles including charcoal, ink, paintbrush, watercolor, and many more. They also offer a variety of border styles that you can use for certificates and a ton of other stuff. The design we're working with today is a logo I had the privilege of creating for Figurado Cigar Company. Their main request was to have an illustration of their dog with a cigar in his mouth. I found fonts that I thought would be perfect for their logo and edited the illustration to give continuity to the overall look. On number 1, the brush style I used fit the strokes of the font. So if we zoom in, as you can see, it tapers to a rounded end and not to a point, in the same way that our font also tapers to rounded ends. Now I just want to show you real quick how I created this brush. With this one, I just made a line, just with the pen tool. I don't want any fill on it, so I'm just going to pull that up, / to get rid of that. And then made it, let's say, a 6 point, and then I put the rounded caps and corners. So if we zoom in, you can see we have rounded caps and corners. The next thing I did is go to Object, Path, and Outline Stroke. So now you can see that our path, our line, is no longer a line, but now it's a fill. And then what I did is, using the direct selection tool, which is A on your keyboard, just click and drag over the 2 anchor points at the end of the width of the stroke, which is now a path. And then holding Shift, I'm going to do the same on the other side. Control and then the minus or hyphen key up next to 0 will zoom you out a little bit. And then I typed an S on my keyboard for the scale tool, and then I'm going to click, and now holding Shift, you can see that line is now becoming a long tapered line. So if we zoom up on here, you can see we have just a slight round. It's not pointed. And on some of these longer lines, let me find one that's pretty long. Okay, this one here is pretty long. I'm going to move it. You can see that the way that it tapers and comes to that point, it's pretty drawn out. On the shorter lines, it's not as drawn out because our stroke is set up to always be the weight that we chose. So if we choose, for example, on this, it's a 1 point line with our brush. If I make that 2 points, then you can see the whole thing becomes 2 points. And if we double click on the stroke, you can see that our options are scale proportionately, stretch to fit stroke length, and stretch between guides. Our only 2 options here would be to scale proportionately or stretch to fit stroke length. So I chose stretch to fit stroke length so that the lines were always the same width. Like at the widest point, all of the strokes in our illustration are the same. Now if I change it, it's going to allow me to do this. Say OK, apply to strokes. Now you can see that the shorter strokes are skinnier. And the reason for that is that the long strokes, they have a longer distance to mature to become whatever, full line they are. And the shorter ones don't have as much. So let's go ahead and double click that and go back to stretch to fit stroke length. Apply. And there we go. So for this one, I used a tapered line that I created custom. All right, for the next idea, the font that I found was this awesome continuous line look where everything's the same weight. And so obviously you don't want to use a tapered line for that. What I used here is the 5-point round calligraphic brush. So with this brush, if you double click it, you can change its roundness, you can change its angle, and you can change its size. So I don't want to change its roundness. I don't want to change the angle. I'll go back to 0. But the size was a little big at 5, so I'm going to drop that down to 4. It's set to fixed, which means that it's going to be 4 point around the whole thing, which is what we want because because our line weight needs to be consistent. So now everything's been set to 4. It just gives it a little bit. Let's see. Go back to 5. So I'm looking in this area on the ear. So if it's set at 4, we got a little more definition here, but the line gets a little skinnier, which gets a little further from the weight of our font. So I'm actually going to keep it at 5. So the benefit to this one is that using the calligraphic brush, it's not being stretched out over the line. It's just being applied to that line. So this brush is set with a round. So that means that at the end of every line, it ends rounded. Another way to accomplish that same look would be, I'm going to select all the strokes, come up here and get rid of that one. And then we could just go, it looks like 5 point, and then rounded caps. Now the reason I didn't do that on this one is because I wanted to use the brushes. I wanted to use that specific design element on this project. All right, now the third one's a little bit different. So with this one, if we zoom in on the font, we can see we've got distressing that's pretty inconsistent, pretty weathered. Some of the characters have like where it's frayed, some of them don't. The R is a real good example of what I'm after on this one. So we zoom out, and I'm just going to select it. And what I did on this option is I took our very first one with the brush that I made, the taper brush, and then I went to Object and Expand Appearance. You can also do Path and Outline Stroke. Once I did that, I select everything, I have it grouped together. So everything that's going to get this treatment that kind of gives it that grunge look, I select all of that stuff. And I used a brush that is part of the collection of brushes that's automatically opening up with your Adobe Illustrator. And it's this one right here. Charcoal Feather, stretch to fit stroke length. That's exactly what I want. And then I have it set pretty light. If I zoom in, you can see I have that one selected. It's 0.5. And that's also 0.5, I think. The little whisker lines I left a little bit smaller because they got a little wonky as it got bigger. So looking at the R, kind of for the ideal distress on this look, I'm just looking for some areas to show just some weathering. So you can't completely control it because it is a brush and it is set. It's set to what it has, where, you know, we're looking at the font, they're all treated a little bit different. But this gets us to that point where it's got that look. So now we have 3 different options that they can pick from. We've got just the tapered line that we created, and it fits with this font, and that looks great. We have the rounded that fits with this font, and that looks great. And then we have the kind of distress that kind of has a little bit more of a playful dog look. And I just wanted them to have these options just to be able to look at it and figure out exactly what it is that represents the business that they want to be. All right, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please subscribe and hit that like button for good measure. I hope you have a great week, and we'll see you in the next one.